The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We welcome you back to our fall season and the conclusion of our 10th year. I hope you had an enjoyable and exciting summer, as well as a safe one with your family and friends. To start off with, we will cover a subject that, frankly, we have not spent enough time on: agriculture and farming, especially Pennsylvania, being the fourth largest farming state in the country, which produces close to $1 billion of produce. We are pleased to bring you today's guest, United States Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson, of the largest geographic congressional district actually in Pennsylvania, the 15th. Congressman Thompson is the dean of Pennsylvania's congressional delegation, which means he has the longest tenure and is the longest serving U.S. Congressman. And for the purposes of today's show, and more importantly, he is the majority chairman of the House Agricultural Committee. Glenn is a former Eagle Scout who has served as a Scoutmaster and has also received the National Distinguished Eagle Scout Award. He is also a former Bald Eagle Area School Board member and past vice chair of the Private Industry Council. Besides agriculture, Thompson has served on the House Committee on Education and Workforce. He was the primary draftsman of the Career and Technical Education Act for the 21st century, which was signed into law by President Donald Trump. GT is a community leader and volunteer firefighter for over 3 decades. He is also a graduate of Penn State University, where he received his bachelor's degree and then went on to his graduate work at Temple University. His bachelor's degree as well as his master's degree are in education. GT is also a descendant of dairy farmers, so he knows of what he speaks. We will talk about all these things on today's show, especially the loss of farms in Pennsylvania, the impact that feeding Americans in Pennsylvania has on our national security, the influence of foreign countries and other types of conglomerates buying up our acreage for farmland that is concerning, as well as delve into how the crisis at the border is impacting the farming industry. We look forward to covering these items today with GT on today's show. Welcome back.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Congressman, welcome to the Volpe Report.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are starting our fall season after our summer siesta that we take, and no one better to have on this show. I said in your open, Congressman, that this show, believe it or not, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've covered many subjects, and a subject that has not gotten enough attention from me and should is, Pennsylvania is about the 3rd or 4th largest agricultural farming production state in the entire country. And having been a former candidate for governor of Pennsylvania myself, I remember touring dairy farms as part of that campaign. People had me going out early in the mornings, and I know the significance of dairy farms and all farms in Pennsylvania, so shame on me for not spending more time. But you are an expert. You are the powerful majority agricultural chairman for the United States House of Representatives. So you are, we'll call, the dean, not only of the Pennsylvania delegation, which you also are because of your seniority, you're also the dean of the agricultural industry right now in the majority in this country. So would you give us an overview of Pennsylvania and what are the issues that we face, not only in Pennsylvania, but across the country, because you deal with the whole country in your position?
No, absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity. I'm proud to serve as the only 3rd Pennsylvanian to chair the U.S. House Agriculture Committee, the first in over almost 170 years.
Wow.
Right just prior to the Civil War was the last one, and we had the very first one in 1820. Agriculture touches the lives as an industry in more ways the lives of every Pennsylvania family and every American family multiple times a day. And it's more than picking up the tools of agriculture of a knife, fork, or a spoon. And in particular, with what the agriculture industry does, and specifically the farm bill that we're preparing, which we do once every 5 years. It's an extensive piece of legislation, $1.51 trillion over 10 years. But the way that touches the lives of every Pennsylvania, things not just with the food that's on your plate, it's making sure that the families who provide that food have the tools that they need to manage risk. There's a lot of public-private partnership today in the farm bill. It's a different farm bill than 30 years ago, where they literally probably took a look. I always picture you take just a pile of money and a grain shovel, and you scoop it up and you throw it and hope that it makes a difference. We're prescriptive now. We have public-private partnerships. Farmers have skin in the game, but farmers have huge risk, right? Weather. There's no industry more at risk to interfering with the delivery of either a crop or, quite frankly, a herd of livestock, depending on how severe the weather is. It's also great for the consumers in terms of those consumers, those say Pennsylvania families are struggling financially. We have a provision, nutrition title in that farm bill that it is as much about financial security as it is food security, because we invest in not just the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is what decades ago they called that food stamps. We don't have food stamps today, but it's also about SNAP employment, career and technical education, helping people reach a rung a little higher in the ladder of opportunity of getting a job, if not for the first time, maybe a job getting a better job when they've lost one, and or maybe they're working minimum wage, multiple jobs. A lot of people in SNAP are doing that. About a quarter of the people on that are at financial risk. But it's beyond that as well. It's about rural economic development, about rural broadband and connectivity, sewer, water, utilities. It is about research. American agriculture is science, technology, and innovation. That's my definition of it. And so it's about our land-grant universities like Penn State, who is a land-grant university made possible because of the Agriculture Committee, supported through the Farm Bill, and the research that they do, the extension services that they provide. There's just there's a forestry title, and we in Pennsylvania, we are Penn's Woods. We have more trees today than when William Penn got the charter for the service of his father to the king in the military. And so having healthy forests, having a robust forest products industry, there's just so much that is packed in, impacts every day. So I like to say that agriculture is about jobs. It's about economic impact, and both of those are huge. And ultimately, agriculture is about national security, because the slipperyest slope to national insecurity is food insecurity. I've witnessed that firsthand in a number of different countries.
Sure. Congressman, one of the things that we read a lot about, and I have followed, is various individuals, countries, organizations buying up farmland. I read some critical articles about Bill Gates buying up all kinds of farmland around the country. I was recently talking to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and he actually signed a bill in Florida banning Chinese or Chinese-connected ownership of farmland in Florida. So you touch on, something that I think maybe we can get a little more in depth into. You just touched on it. To most people, when you talk about farms, they know how important they are to feed our country, obviously, to provide milk and all those things. But I don't think they fully appreciate the national security risk and a certain level of protectionism that the United States government and you as chairman of the Agricultural Committee need to provide to guarantee our national security. Farming impacts national security in ways almost as much as tanks and airplanes and ships. So talk a little bit about that, Ed.
No, actually, food security is at the heart of national security. And this farm bill really is a farm, food, and national security bill. There's no doubt about it. About 1% is best I can determine at this point of American agriculture is owned acreage. Acreage is owned by foreign entities. China's not the only country, and this is not something that's new either. It's kind of interesting, and important for people to understand, especially our elected officials, that this was an issue that was raised back in the 1980s when I believe it was Japan that was buying up a lot of American agriculture production acreage. Like most countries, they want to make sure their people can be fed. So as a result of that, states like Pennsylvania decades ago put in place limitations on how much acreage a foreign entity could purchase agriculture. I think as I've read that some of the data I've seen in Pennsylvania, the first limitation was 5,000 acres. And then I believe the state legislature and the governor, at whatever point this occurred in the past, took that down to 200 acres. Agriculture needs to be listed as a strategic initiative, reviewed by the committee, that there's an interagency committee that reviews the sale of strategic American assets, and agriculture needs to be put on that list for those reviews. It is not on there at this point.
Right. One of the things I mentioned to you as we were just coming on before we taped, it surprised me, actually. It's double take kind of number, the number of farms we've lost in Pennsylvania over the last. Talk a little bit about that, Congressman, like the factors producing that and what you as chairman of the Agricultural Committee and the United States government can do to help alleviate that.
Yeah, I mean, our farmers are really on the front lines domestically when it comes to food insecurity and therefore national security from that perspective. And it is alarming how much acreage has been lost on an annual basis. The number of farms, the number of acreage, the number of things like dairy herds in particular. I mean, agriculture is our number one industry in Pennsylvania, and dairy is our largest commodity, but it has been in challenging times. Even things like solar. I mean, nobody can ever tell me that when they take what was a farm and they put solar on it, it was a solar farm. It is not a farm. It's not producing those essential things we need. And I'm not opposed to solar, but there's lots of rooftops and there's ground that's not productive, that's infertile, that's highly erodible, where it'd be better. So we need to be careful in those practices as well. And I encourage local communities that have their own zoning ordinances that are heavy with agriculture, that to pay attention to those types of things. We need to avoid that last crop. You know what the last crop is?
No.
A housing development.
Right.
Yeah. A parking lot, a mall, a housing development. We have more and more bellies that we need to feed all the time. Right. And not just those in America. Because of our trade and our humanitarian assistance, we provide, life-saving assistance around the world, and that's really compounded. And I think people are paying attention to that because of what Russia has done in Ukraine, which is a breadbasket in Europe.
I would be remiss. That was a great answer, Congressman. I'd be remiss if I didn't also then segue into one of the key things you talked about that's impacting farmers and farm production and agricultural production: the lack of usable acreage being taken up by things like housing and parking lots and those things. How could you not then segue from that to say the impact of what's going on at our southern border has to be creating havoc across the entire country? The top 8, what I'll call heavily blue Democratic states and cities in this country are now the ones screaming about, the American dream and let everybody in and open our borders, are now declaring emergency because they're being overrun by migrants that are coming in record numbers by the Biden administration's failure to police the border. And now they're coming to you for more funding to take our tax dollars to bail out New York and other of these cities. So I'd like your thoughts about how, everything someone said to me a long time ago seems to be interconnected to everything else. So, and this to me is a direct link. What you're talking about is impacting farmers. How could all these people finding places for them not further impact that negatively?
Well, that's right. And it's really interesting. These states that are amnesty states, amnesty cities, just earlier this week, listening to the mayor of New York City, pretty much, he didn't come out and say that. He used his own words, but pretty much New York City in particular is no longer an amnesty city. I mean, they're only experiencing, and I know it's over 100,000, but it's the largest city in the United States of America, right? Well, I got news for them. There's a lot of towns in Arizona, in Texas, that are much smaller towns, and they've been overwhelmed with millions of people coming here illegally, encouraged really by the words and the policies of the Biden administration, and that just compounds the fact that those are more bellies are coming into this country, and so the need for food. I think it also it takes resources away that perhaps that open border policy, I think, has a negative impact on the Farm Bill, because there's it's just really challenging to find there's not going to be any new money in terms of supporting the families, the hardworking families that are here, that provide us with food and fiber. These folks that are coming across the border right now in the millions, they're not stopping to work on these farms. They're someone who's operating a farm or a ranch on the border in the United States, in the border of Mexico, is having the same problem with workforce as what we find here in Pennsylvania. And without workforce, quite frankly, you don't have food security. You may have a great crop you grow, you may have great markets, but you got to have the workforce. And so it's interesting. It's a different type of person, and they're all, in my experience when I was there, and I witnessed this firsthand, the number of different countries that people are coming from. I think it's over 150 countries that are coming from, and countries that are not friendly to us, and let alone the side effects of of drugs and crime, gang members that are integrated into these families that have been encouraged by President Biden and the Biden administration to be able to ignore our rule of law and to be able to come here. And so it is certainly a pressing issue.
Yes. One of the things I've been very critical, Congressman, on this show of progressives, the far left. People tend to view Democrats as liberal. Liberals I can have conversations with. It's progressive that to me is a toxic element in our country. They, of course, want open borders, but they won't talk to you or have an intelligent debate or conversation about the folks that are coming over, the drug mules, the cartels that are pushing their drugs over through these poor people that are suffering, that they will, of course, on the condition that they'll get them in if they carry drugs in. And the fact that terrorists are coming from the Middle East, rerouting through South America and coming up as families of migrants, where they don't comprehend or talk intelligently about the downside of anything. They see one side of the ledger and do we want to provide humanitarian aid? Of course. Do we want a country that welcomes, as our immigrants came over to this great country to have freedom and opportunity? Of course, we want those ideals. But in a country governed by the rule of law, which I hope America still is, that'll be another question for you about the dual nature of the double standard we're facing in America now. But, how you cannot police to protect the American citizens and the national security of this country, so your comment on that.
Well, it's not that they're blind to those negative consequences. I think many of them are hoping that this would transform our country in terms of, the fact that they've just let people into the country. Now, the interesting part is they haven't done it in a humanitarian way. I mean, there are thousands of these folks that are crossing into the United States that never make it. The children that are abused, the women that are raped, the trafficking that occurs for modern day slavery, whether it's hospitality type or work type slavery, or quite frankly, the sex trade, and they can't be blind to that. It's just obvious today, these unintended consequences. But I think their hope is that enough of these folks will, that just because they left them in, even though they didn't care for them, what's fascinating is one of the last things they're told as they're set out and put on a bus or a plane or whatever in terms of to integrate into the country, awaiting a court date that most of them are not going to show back up for.
Of course.
Yeah, but they're told you can't work. Well, how unethical and inhumane is that to take a person or a family and strip away any provision for them to provide for themselves? It shows you they don't really care about these people. It's more about, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal. No, I'm a progressive. You're right. They identify themselves right today as that. And they say, so I hope you'll remember that, and we need to get you to vote, and you need to vote for progressive Democrats going forward.
Right.
Because a liberal Democrat's not good enough anymore.
No.
It's, they defeat them in primary so that they can put really socialists in place. And the unintended consequences are just are devastating, not just to that population, but to those communities that I've been in on the border, how they are strained. And so I'm sorry, 110,000 in New York City, when you look at the size of that city and the resources that they have compared to a small town on the Mexican border, the United States town. These folks are, they can't even begin to understand what these folks are, the people, the U.S. citizens there are living with. And so it is, as you kind of mentioned, I think I'll talk more about two standards. Absolutely two standards. It's even though New York City or a place like that would be okay to handle. By the way, it's not just the Texas governor that's sending folks to New York City. The Biden administration has sent most of them there. They fly them up in the middle of the night.
Ghost planes, we call them. Yeah. Yeah, ghost planes. Absolutely. And so here's where I think that this is going to. I don't know how we got to seal the border. Now, I'm all in favor of legal immigration. Our families all had our heritage somewhere else and came here, and we need that. We need workforce right now. When you look at the average age of the United States worker, but at the same time, I'm not sure the strategy is going to work out for the progressives in the long run, because at least some of these folks are come across, especially the ones from South America, Latin America. These are conservative families. Religion is important to them. Faith is important to them. Right. Family is important to them. If that's not shared values, conservative, it's just a matter. We need to reach out and be working with these, obviously reaching out to whether they come in legally or illegally. If they're eventually going to be here, the Republican Party needs to do a better job of reaching out on the shared values. Now, I said they're coming from over 150 countries. So, maybe some of them are coming here, those other countries, to escape socialism, or maybe some are coming here to spread socialism. I don't know. Sure. We don't know who they are. Sure. And I'll get you out of here on this last question. We have about 2 minutes left, Congressman. As I told you, and you we applied it to the border crisis. But obviously in the headlines now, we have a daily double standard of justice enforcement in this country. We have no expense being taken for granted, and no expense is too much to pursue ex-President Donald Trump. He's already got a record number of indictments, more on the way. And then you turn around and you have Hunter Biden, who got the greatest sweetheart deal initially in the history of criminal justice. And to the point a federal judge was so outraged, threw out the agreement. Well, Merrick Garland, our U.S. Attorney General, appoints the same U.S. attorney from Delaware that basically whitewashed the initial investigation, and now he's been designated special counsel, which, as a lawyer myself, Congressman, the last time I checked, is in violation of the special counsel law, because they're not supposed to be government employees. They're supposed to be outside of government. So your comment on that fiasco and what it's done to Americans looking at, well, we're a third world country silencing our political enemies in former President Trump, but apparently the big guy who showed up on tapes and dealing with foreign countries with Hunter, well, that's something we don't talk about in this country. Your comment.
Well, I tell you what, Lady Liberty is portrayed, as you know, as a person who's worked with the law, is portrayed with a blindfold, with a scale in her hand. Well, I tell you what, they're peaking, and they're peaking big time, and they're putting their thumb on the scale, and it's just wrong. And anybody that's done that, is doing that, has done that, is doing that within our judicial system, they need to be removed from office. You know, whether it's in elections is the greatest tool that we have. Obviously, if we could accomplish that in the judicial branch as well, in terms of bringing these complaints about things like the so-called in name only attorney general that we have, right. Because at the fabric of this, it breaks down the trust of the American people. You know, we all want to always, and I think we have until recent years, had confidence in our judicial branch.
Yes. That
quite frankly, Lady Liberty is blind and doesn't put her thumb, the government does not put its thumb on the scale of law, and it preserves our liberties. So because I thought it was interesting that this week or next week, when Hunter Biden is finally going to court on the gun charge that he had, conveniently his dad, the president, is leaving the country, getting as much as going to the other side of the world, literally, India, to get as much distance as possible.
Amazing.
Between him and that experience. I mean, I do. You know, I feel bad for the president, and because of the family issues that he has had, but I don't feel bad for that family because what appears to be corrupt behavior.
Right. No.
You know, the corruption in the evidence, and I'm so appreciative. A friend of mine, Jamie Comer, I helped him. I was on the steering committee to help him get that position as leader, Republican leader, now chairman of the House Oversight Committee. And he is doing such a great job. He is not jumping to doing what the Democrats did. I mean, Democrats started talking about impeachment before President Trump was president. You know, when he was after he won and before he was sworn in and inaugurated. I mean, with Jamie's leadership, and another good friend of mine, a fellow wrestler, Jimmy Jordan, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, to my fellow chairman. I mean, they're building a case, and so they're doing it in the proper way, following the rule of law. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are impatient. They're impatient because they saw the double standard and the abuse that the Democrats did to Donald J. Trump for more than 6 years now. But we cannot stoop to their level. We need to honor the rule of law. We need to restore the rule of law. And that means as how we prosecute this, how we pursue this is consistent with the rule of law. And although I get impatient as well when I see the different pieces of evidence come forward, you know, when, quite frankly, you got to do this properly, and that means building the evidence case. And I just ask people to have confidence, but also have patience, because we're not conducting ourselves the way the Democrats did for the past 6 years or so.
Well. Regrettably, Congressman, we've run out of time. I want to thank you, GT, personally for making time to talk about these issues. I hope in this media market, 25 or 26 counties, we go about as far west as Williamsport. We probably have a majority of the farming acreage in Pennsylvania, because we're not in the mountains here in the northeast and central part of Pennsylvania. So I'm glad I was able to do a show. It was an education for me. I'm sure it'll be for them. So thank you for your time, and I hope we can call you back sometime in the future.
Anytime. Honored to join you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, GT. Have a good day.